Hi, I'm Steven Ramirez, the CEO of Beyond the Arc, and it is great to be here at Finovate, and I could not be happier about our next conversation. Kathleen, welcome. So happy that you could join me,
Thank
really
you.
looking forward to our conversation. Tell me a little bit about yourself and a little bit about SVB.
Sure. Well, I lead our payments business at SVB. I've been at SVB for about 2 years. Prior to that, I've been in Fintech and financial services my entire career, spanning companies like American Express, Capital One, PayPal, several startups. And what I always tell people is I feel like it was all leading to me coming to SVB. I now am at a bank, which I love, but getting to work with a ton of innovative companies in the fintech space that I have a ton of passion for.
Well, and I know firsthand that you're doing some really exciting things in payments, and so I want to just dive right in.
Sure.
You know, a topic I think that we both share a lot of passion for is embedded payments and embedded banking. But you know, I think that it's now become a buzzword. There's a lot of hype around it. You know, can you help us cut through the noise? Like, what's real, what's hype?
Absolutely. So it is real.
Good to know.
The simplest way I describe it is embedded payments is when you have a technology company that is not formally a financial institution like a bank, fulfilling on financial services for an end user, whether it's a consumer or a small business, right? So traditionally, if you wanted to access your money or get a loan, you would go to a bank. And nowadays, you don't necessarily have to do that. You might go to a software provider that is being powered by a bank. So that is embedded payments.
And why is SVB well positioned on that opportunity?
It's a great question and one that gives me a lot of enthusiasm for being at SVB. We bank the innovation economy. So we literally bank the investors that are investing in companies that are innovating and the companies themselves that are innovating. So the customers of our bank are literally the names that you see that are doing embedded payments. And I can list off in several examples, but basically any company that's innovating with financial services is likely banking with us. And given the fact that you require a bank to be able to do any kind of financial services, they naturally come to us first. And we know their business incredibly well. We're underwriting massive loans for them. So it's a natural progression from being their commercial bank to being the bank that's actually powering their embedded payments.
Now, there's a huge range from startups like, you and I could be in our dorm room,
That's right.
to being a multi-billion-dollar, decacorn, right? So from an embedded payments perspective, is there a type of company that you're sort of well suited to work with?
Yeah, and SVB, I would say in the embedded payment space, we tend to work with more advanced companies that are later stage. And part of that is it's actually quite an undertaking to do embedded payments. There's a lot of risk management, a lot of compliance, a lot of operational complexities that at the earlier stage you may not be prepared to take on. And so if you're working directly with SVB for your embedded payments needs, chances are you've built out a pretty mature and established business model already and a lot of those risk functions as an example. Whereas if you're at the earlier stage, you're probably working with an as-a-service provider that is actually taking on all of that value chain for you.
Now, you're working with startups. Obviously, we're now in this, I think of it as an ecosystem, right? Like no company, no matter how big, is able to sort of survive alone. It's really about partnership. What does that partnership look like? But it's not easy on the flip side for fintechs to be able to partner with a bank. So do you have any perspective on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, partnering with a bank is not easy. Banks are
big underscore under that.
Highly regulated institutions. And even if you're a client of the bank, if you're leveraging the bank for your embedded payments, you're much more of a third party in the bank's eyes than a client, right? They're allowing you to fulfill some of the components of delivering a financial service that they typically are accountable for. And no matter who's actually doing the part of the value chain, the regulator is holding the bank accountable to ensure it's in compliance at all times. So it can be challenging for both the bank and the fintech to ensure that compliance is happening. The bank doesn't want to make it too much of a burden for the fintech, but they also can't risk not being in compliance with the law. So there's a lot of effort that goes into managing that.
Any advice that you would give to a fintech who wants to work with a bank like an SVB?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first piece of advice I would give is make sure you're working with a bank that has you as their target segment and that they have invested in deeply understanding your business type, because it's likely that you're challenging their traditional models of underwriting, managing risk, And so knowing that they've put a ton of resources behind understanding you as a segment is going to be important. And you know that as your roadmap evolves, they'll evolve their roadmap to meet your needs because they've prioritized it. The second, and somewhat connected to that, is make sure that they have a dedicated business unit that's supporting the unique engagement you're having with them. It is very different than traditional risk management that happens in a bank when you're taking on a third party. They're a client, but they're essentially a third party from the bank's perspective. So making sure that there are specialists across all of the different functions that are going to be serving your needs who understand this unique model. They're going to have a different operating model, a different risk management framework. Frankly, the economics are very different for the bank, so you need to know that you've got those experts that are going to be there because you're most definitely going to hit bumps in the road along your journey.
All right, well, I've got one last question for you, and this is obviously a really dynamic time in payments, right? I think just the amount of change that we've seen and that we continue to see. So from that perspective, what do you see on the horizon? What excites you? What are the next level of innovation that you expect to roll out?
Yeah, well, you've heard me say risk a whole bunch of times.
I have, in fact, actually heard that, yes.
I believe that over the next several years, we're going to see a lot of the same. More and more companies wanting to incorporate payments into their value proposition, into their business model, to make their customer experience better, to make their economics better. And so as we see that happen, the needs around risk management are going to be more pressing. And so some of the challenges that we're experiencing today that we're solving through manual means, as an example, I think are going to be solved through software and more innovation and technology over time. So simple things like know your customer or managing to ensure you're preventing money laundering from happening. A lot of banks do this very manually, and there's a lot of room for innovation to make it easier for them and for their fintech partners to fulfill on these obligations. And so I think the next several years we're going to see a lot more innovation in the risk management part of embedded payments.
Excellent. Well, Kathleen, thank you so much for this conversation. I want to thank everybody for joining us here, Finovate 2022.